Hello there, and welcome back. Hope you're all doing well and watching the slow death of the UK as every single ministry grinds to a slow and dreadful halt. Many have been linking this to Brexit and are championing a rapid and immediate return to the European Union, prompting many to ask, is this possible? Well, today I hope to shed some light on that issue. A quick message from me before we start: if you like the content, help the channel grow. It's only through you that this keeps going and not just some random dude shouting into the void. Anyhow, let's get to it. Britain narrowly voted to leave the European Union in 2016. The context and meaning of that vote has been hotly debated ever since, with vitriol pouring in from all sides. Allegations of Russian interference, of tactics unbecoming a democracy, dodgy stats, and of course, dodgy buses. Despite apparently being the express and obvious will of the British public, the logjam continued to worsen in Parliament as nobody could actually define what Brexit would look like.
Brexit means Brexit.
A large part of the issue was and is, to this day, that Brexit means contradictory things. To some, it meant a larger social state, protecting communities which had been left exposed to the vicissitudes of global capital and trade. To others, it meant freedom from the regulatory burden, allowing for efficiencies and shortcuts to be found that meant delivering products at lower cost and increasing profit margins. To others still, it meant sovereignty over all decisions, and of course, the people who just hate anyone who looks foreign. Many of these positions are completely contradictory, especially the economic arguments. You cannot simultaneously set fire to government regulations to allow the engine of capital room to move whilst also protecting people from that engine. Those two things in the ideological context simply do not work. And that has driven widespread dissatisfaction with Brexit, leading to collapsing support. As support collapses and support for the EU starts to rise, people are naturally asking, how does Britain reverse course? Unfortunately, this isn't going to be one of those fun videos where I tell you everything is fine and dandy. Brexit cannot be reversed without great difficulty. The problem is less practical as in mechanisms and more diplomatic. Many of the Brexit bills can quite easily be reversed, as we haven't diverged too far just yet. Indeed, if the current polling is accurate, we are likely to see Sir Keir Starmer do exactly that in office and take us back into economic realignment, making trading relations easier and solving the Ireland problem. The difficulty comes in both the support for the EU from the UK population and the reaction of our European friends and allies. Despite many in Britain considering it a great and hilarious joke that placing the messy-haired buffoon that is Boris Johnson into the halls of power, our neighbours absolutely did not consider this a funny moment at all, especially as Johnson's proclivity towards horrendously dated colonial attitudes and ability to insult many quickly caused repeated diplomatic incidents. The frequent threats of unilateral harm to our alliances, withdrawal from long-standing commitments, and utter clear and sheer falsehoods has harmed Britain's international reputation to an incredible degree. For many years after decolonisation, we've been considered to be almost an elder statesman on the global stage, with world-class civil service, a reliable partner, and the people to call when you need a diplomatic solution. Lamentably, the actions of Johnson and others have shredded this hard-won reputation, and it will be a long time before it returns. The consequences of this is that even in a government headed by Labour, even in the incredibly unlikely situation of a Lib Dem opposition, the continental European nations would still look at the UK askance. There simply isn't any trust and little goodwill for the UK as a whole. Simplifying the trading relationship, as Starmer is likely to do, will be welcomed by the EU and achieved easily. Reentry, however, is an entirely different game. The reason for this is that realignment is quite an easy situation for the EU. It simplifies a complicated border problem and makes costs more predictable and neutralises a potential trading threat that is poorly made American or Chinese goods entering the single market by the back door. Reentry, though, that means opening up the EU's consensus politics back towards what is perceived to be a contrarian UK, a UK that is seen as flaky, unreliable and selfish. There is little appetite to let the UK back into this club when the result could and likely would be so disruptive towards the smooth running of the EU's functions, especially with the troubling rise of the far right in France, Poland and Hungary, and the current crisis in Ukraine. The other major issue is the seesawing nature of support on headline intention. It looks like the desired threshold has already been met, with polls now often showing variations on a 60-40 split excluding don't knows. But when you start to look under the hood of those polling numbers, support for the EU becomes far more ephemeral. When you ask people what they believe the future UK-EU relationship should look like, a plurality but not a majority wish to rejoin. I have absolutely no doubt that EU countries will be looking very closely at that data and will want a supermajority of at least 60% of the population solidly wanting back in before they even begin to contemplate a UK return. Worse still is the conditions of that re-entry. The UK had negotiated an incredibly strong and privileged position in the EU, making the decision to throw it all away all the more baffling. There was a rebate which reduced the cost of the fee, an opt-out for EU laws and no commitment to taking up the euro. As even Guy Verhofstadt has made clear, the era of bespoke deals for EU entry is now over and it is a take it or leave it situation. The Schengen area, which the UK was not part of, will be a terrible sell to the British public, despite its convenience and boost for services-related trade. The rebate will not be offered again, making the cost of the EU far higher in terms of a membership fee. The euro will be mandated, and the euro is not popular in Britain. Indeed, it is unlikely that the euro expanding to the UK will be good for the British economy and will likely have negative effects on the functioning of the UK's services and financial sector first model. Those three things combined will cause a huge groundswell of support against rejoining unless compromises can be reached on those issues, and even then no compromise may be possible if the EU decides Britain must choose to be in or out. All of this adds to a complicated diplomatic and PR problem, with likely a two-step referendum needed, one to signal intention and one on the terms. No doubt people like Johnson, Hannan, Farage and others will come screaming out of the woodwork to attack this position, and this will have an impact. Whilst this may seem like a strange corollary, Britain simply hasn't addressed its colonial past, and too many in the country see the empire as an ambivalent or even positive force. This nostalgia leads to people estimating Britain to be in a far stronger position than reality would suggest. Indeed, one of the main drivers of the Brexit vote was immigration, and that's not going to get any better anytime soon. Between Britain's addiction to cheap foreign labour and the populace misconstruing by a factor of double the amount of immigrants in the UK. Whilst FBPE Twitter loves to try and say that immediate British re-entry is guaranteed and an easy process, they are rather naive towards the diplomatic effects and the toll the years of Tory government have taken. Whilst the process side of things can be achieved very quickly, those diplomatic problems aren't going to go away anytime soon. I frequently cautioned in the past that it will be midway through the 2030s by the time we are in a position to reapply, and even then that might be too soon. We cannot apply to rejoin the EU with support that hovers around 50%, leading to fear of things being very quickly undone. The UK as a country must demonstrate that it is committed to the European project if we are to pursue future membership, and that can only be done by an overwhelming victory. So perhaps instead of demanding an application for re-entry now, rejoiners should recognise that this is not a sprint but a marathon, and we must organise and convince people of this country that our future lies not as a Singapore in Europe but as a leading light of the European project. On a personal level, I was devastated when we voted to leave. I'm a graduate of the Erasmus programme. Some of the closest people in my life are continental Europeans, many of those relationships forged during my Erasmus year. For a working class kid from one of the most deprived areas in the UK, the idea that I would have had that opportunity was not even on my radar, but through the EU, I did. The impression it left on me is huge. I got to travel across Europe, see priceless works of cultural treasures, and most importantly, was able to broaden my thinking in ways I didn't even realise I needed. I want that opportunity for other people like me, who deserve to be able to grow up in a Britain that is confident, assured and outward looking, not mired in small-mindedness and crippled by the actions of those who cut off our noses to spite our faces. Rejoining the EU for me is a necessity, not merely a want, but if we're going to do it, we need to do it properly, and that is why we need to be considered and judicious and not jump before we're ready to walk. That's all from me. Let me know what you think in the comments and the Discord. Consider liking, sharing and subscribing. Thank you and goodbye.